Entire libraries of human knowledge are locked away in plain sight. We hold the very words of ancient peoples, carved in stone and etched in clay, yet their messages are utterly silent to us. This is the profound mystery of the world's undeciphered languages, and today we begin a journey into the heart of 35 of history's most baffling scripts. By the end, you will understand the greatest linguistic puzzles that have stumped experts for centuries and the revolutionary tools that might finally solve them. We will uncover a beautiful manuscript filled with impossible plants and meet a lost civilization that recorded its history in knots. What does it feel like to stare at a message you know is important but cannot read? The silence begins on the island of Crete, amidst the ruins of the magnificent Minoan palaces. Here, archaeologists unearthed the first of our great mysteries, a script known as Linear A. These are not grand proclamations carved into temple walls. They are the intimate, everyday records of a brilliant civilization, inscribed on clay tablets that survived fire and collapse. We find lists of goods, inventories of spices and cloth, and dedications to forgotten gods. The Minoans used this script for centuries, a flowing and elegant system of signs that recorded the heartbeat of their world. Then the puzzle deepens. The Minoan successors on the Greek mainland adapted this script, creating a new form called Linear B. For decades, Linear B was just as mysterious. But in the 1950s, a brilliant architect named Michael Ventris performed a miracle of decipherment. He proved that Linear B was used to write a very early form of Greek. This was a monumental breakthrough, but it made the mystery of Linear even more profound. We can read the script that came after, but the original remains a locked door. If Linear B is Greek, what language is Linear A? The signs themselves are familiar because Linear B borrowed them. We can sound out many of the Linear A words, pronouncing the syllables as they were in Linear B. But the words we speak are meaningless. They belong to a language that has left no other trace, a tongue that vanished from the earth over 3,000 years ago. Is it a language isolate, a single branch on the human family tree that was cut off and lost forever? Or does it represent a completely different language family, perhaps one spoken in the region before Greek peoples ever arrived? Every attempt to plug in known languages has failed. The Minoans whisper to us in a tongue we cannot comprehend, their vibrant culture forever just out of reach, defined by the very script that recorded its existence. From the silent halls of Minoan Crete, we travel thousands of miles and even further back in time, to the banks of the mighty Indus River. Here flourished one of humanity's first grand experiments in urban living, a civilization that built planned cities with sophisticated drainage systems at a time when many other peoples were still nomadic. This was the Indus Valley civilization, and they left behind a mystery as orderly and impenetrable as their city grids. Across thousands of small, intricately carved stone seals and amulets, we find their script. It is a beautiful and compact writing system, featuring elegant figures of animals like unicorns and bulls, alongside short sequences of strange geometric symbols. The very nature of these objects deepens the mystery. These are not royal chronicles or epic poems. They are tiny, most shorter than a modern postage stamp, and their inscriptions are heartbreakingly brief. The average message contains only 4 or 5 signs. How much of a story can you tell in just 4 or 5 words? This is the core of the problem. With no long texts to analyze and, crucially, no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscription that translates the unknown into the known, decipherment has hit a wall that has stood for a century. The brevity of the inscriptions makes statistical analysis, the kind that cracked other codes, incredibly difficult. There simply is not enough data to work with. This scarcity has sparked a fundamental and heated debate. Are we even looking at a written language? Some prominent researchers argue these symbols are not writing at all, but a system of non-linguistic symbols, perhaps denoting family clans, religious icons, or political titles. Think of them not as sentences, but as medieval coats of arms or modern corporate logos. They convey meaning, but not through the structure of a spoken language. Others, however, see the clear hallmarks of a true script. The symbols show a standardized order and structure, suggesting grammatical rules. If it is a language, what language was it? A compelling theory links the Indus people to the Dravidian language family, whose modern descendants include Tamil and Kannada, languages spoken primarily in southern India today. Could the Indus script be the ancestral root of the Dravidian tongues, pushed south by the migrations of Indo-European peoples? It is a tantalizing idea, but without longer texts or that one crucial bilingual clue, the voices of this incredibly advanced society remain sealed inside their beautiful miniature stones, an entire civilization summarized in whispers we cannot quite hear. While the Indus script offers frustrating silence, another text taunts us with a beautiful, maddening cacophony of detail. Locked away in a vault at Yale University is a book unlike any other, a volume that has become the holy grail of cryptographers. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a 240-page codex from the 15th century, filled from edge to edge with a handwritten script that belongs to no known language. The pages are a riot of the bizarre and the impossible. Lush, full-page illustrations depict plants that have never grown on this earth, with bulbous roots, swirling leaves, and flowers that defy any botanical classification. You can spend hours tracing the delicate veins on a leaf, only to realize no such plant has ever existed. The book then shifts to astronomy, presenting circular charts of the cosmos populated by unfamiliar constellations and nude women bathing in interconnected, tubular systems that resemble human anatomy, yet make no biological sense. It is a work of profound and meticulous effort, written by a hand that clearly knew what it was recording, yet for the reader it is a gallery of gorgeous nonsense. For over a century, the world's best codebreakers, from top military cryptanalysts to brilliant mathematicians, have laid siege to its pages. They have all failed. The script possesses a statistical structure that feels like language, with word and sentence-level patterns that mimic natural communication, yet it resists every known decipherment technique. This relentless defiance has birthed equally defiant theories. Is it an incredibly elaborate and expensive hoax created to deceive a wealthy patron? This would make it one of history's most committed and pointless forgeries. Or is it a real language so thoroughly encoded with a unique cipher that the key has been lost to time, perhaps a secret herbal or alchemical knowledge protected from prying eyes? The most poetic idea is that it is a work of art, a constructed language never meant to be spoken, a philosophical exploration of the very concept of writing itself. The Voynich Manuscript is a siren's call, promising profound secrets with one hand while taking away any hope of understanding with the other. It is a book that stares back at you, challenging you to solve a puzzle that may, in the end, have no solution at all. Far from the crowded libraries of Europe, on the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, a parallel mystery was unfolding in near total silence. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a speck of land in the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, famous for its towering stone moai statues. But alongside these colossal faces, the island held another secret, one carved not in stone but in wood. When European missionaries arrived in the 1860s, they made a startling discovery. They found dozens of wooden tablets, staffs, and even a chieftain's breastplate, all covered in a finely etched script. The glyphs were elegant and complex, a parade of stylized human figures, birds, fish, plants, and abstract geometric shapes, all arranged in a precise Boustrophedon pattern. This means the lines of text alternate direction, like an ox plowing a field. You read one line left to right, then turn the tablet upside down to read the next line right to left. It is a system that shows immense forethought and sophistication, but the most devastating part of the discovery was the silence that surrounded it. By the time these tablets were found, there was no one left on the entire island who could decipher them. A series of tragic events, including slave raids, epidemics, and civil strife, had shattered the island's social structure and wiped out the learned classes, the wise elders and priests who held the knowledge of the script. The key had been lost within living memory. The people who carved these glyphs were the ancestors of the very people who now stood beside the Europeans, unable to explain the writings in their own possession. This raises a haunting question. Is Rongo Rongo a full writing system capable of recording the rich oral histories and genealogies of the Rapa Nui people, or is it something else? Some scholars argue it is proto-writing, a sophisticated mnemonic device. In this view, trained chanters would use the glyphs as prompts, each symbol triggering the memory of a specific line in a prayer, a chant, or a historical account. The glyph itself does not represent a specific word or sound, but an entire concept or story segment, much like a single musical note on a sheet of music can call to mind an entire symphony for a trained conductor. Others, however, see the intricate structure and standardized signs as evidence of a true, independent invention of writing. If this is correct, it would be one of the most astonishing intellectual achievements in human history. Every other known writing system can trace its ancestry, directly or indirectly, back to the first scripts in Mesopotamia. The idea that the Rapa Nui people, in complete isolation, cut off from the rest of humanity for centuries, invented their own form of writing from scratch is breathtaking. It would mean that the human drive to record our thoughts is so powerful it can blossom independently in the most remote corner of the world. Yet without a living tradition or a Rosetta Stone to unlock it, the Rongo Rongo tablets stand as magnificent, silent witnesses to a culture's catastrophic loss, their beautiful lines a script for a play where everyone has forgotten their lines. Long before the Minoans built their palaces or the Indus Valley cities were planned, a different kind of record-keeping was emerging in the ancient Near East. Deep in the heart of what is now Iran, a civilization we call Elam was developing its own answer to the administrative needs of a complex society. Their solution was the Proto-Elamite script, and with a history stretching back to around 3,100 years before the Common Era, it holds a formidable title. This is the oldest undeciphered writing system in the entire world. The tablets themselves are humble objects, baked clay documents that feel intensely practical. They are not epic tales of kings and gods, but the balanced sheets of a bustling economy. We find meticulous accounts of livestock, lists of grain quantities, and inventories of textiles. The fascinating part is that we can actually understand a great deal of the numerical system and the basic accounting logic. You can look at one of these tablets and see that it records, for instance, 47 sheep and 12 measures of barley. The numbers are clear. The problem lies with everything else. The script uses two distinct types of signs. One set represents these numbers and measurable units which we can read. The other set is a collection of abstract, linguistic signs that almost certainly denote the names of the people who owned the sheep, the places where the barley was stored, or the titles of the officials in charge. These are the signs that have guarded their secrets for over 5,000 years. The core of the decipherment problem is twofold. First, the underlying language is a complete mystery. Scholars do not know if it represents an early form of the known Elamite language, which itself is poorly understood, or a completely different and lost tongue. Second, the texts are so narrowly focused on administration. They lack the variety of content, the poetry, the royal decrees that would give us contextual clues. It is like having a modern spreadsheet where all the numbers make sense, but every single name and address is written in a code we cannot break. This means we can see the economic engine of this ancient civilization running, we can hear it humming, but we have no idea who was driving it or where it was going. The Proto-Elamite script represents the very dawn of recorded information, a first attempt to make the world manageable through symbols, and its persistent silence reminds us that some of the most fundamental stories, the names of the first individuals in history, are still waiting to be spoken. Across the Atlantic Ocean, another ancient voice was carving its story into stone. In the lush highlands of Oaxaca, Mexico, the Zapotec civilization developed the first true writing system in the Americas. This was not a script for merchants or accountants, but a language of power and legacy, etched onto massive stone slabs, grand stairways, and ornate ceramic urns. These are monumental records designed to last for eternity, proclaiming the deeds of rulers and the sacred cycles of time. The very presence of this script marks a profound intellectual leap in the ancient New World. We can stand before a 2,000-year-old stela, a towering stone pillar, and see the clear evidence of a complex society recording its own history in a structured, visual language. The glyphs themselves are a captivating mix of human figures, animal features, and abstract symbols, all woven together into a cohesive narrative. Deciphering this script has been a story of brilliant breakthroughs and frustrating walls. The greatest success has come with the calendar. Zapotec scribes meticulously recorded dates using a sophisticated system that combined two cycles. One was a 260-day ritual calendar, and the other was a solar year of 365 days. The combination of a sign from each cycle created a unique date that would not repeat for 52 years. Thanks to the work of dedicated scholars, we can now read these dates with confidence. We can pinpoint the specific days on which a ruler was born, ascended to the throne, or oversaw a crucial ceremony. We can even read the names of some of these powerful individuals, recognizing the glyphs that represent names like Storm Cloud or Jaguar. But here, the decipherment hits its limit. It is as if we have found a history book and can read the chapter headings and the names of the key players, but the paragraphs beneath, the actual story of what happened, remain a blur. We do not understand the verbs that describe the actions. We cannot grasp the full sentences that explain the conflicts, the alliances, or the religious beliefs. The underlying grammar and the vast majority of the vocabulary of the ancient Zapotec language from this period are still beyond our reach. We see the skeleton of their history, the dates and names that form its structure, but the flesh and blood of their narrative, the very substance that would bring their world to life, has yet to be recovered. The stones of Oaxaca speak in fragments, telling us when and who, but forever holding back the precious how and why. The monumental stones of the Zapotecs are not the only voices from ancient Mesoamerica waiting to be fully heard. Deeper into the humid lowlands of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, a powerful culture created a script of remarkable complexity. Known today as the Isthmian or Epi-Olmec script, this writing system emerged around 500 years after the Common Era, and it represents a crucial bridge between the region's earliest civilization and the cultures that followed. The key to understanding this script lies with one spectacular artifact, the La Mojora Stela. This towering stone slab is a masterpiece of carving, depicting an elaborately dressed ruler standing in full regalia. But the true treasure is the text itself. Running alongside the figure are more than 450 finely carved glyphs, forming one of the longest and most complete inscriptions from ancient Mesoamerica that we cannot yet read. This is not a short list or a simple date. It is a dense, continuous text, a potential narrative that could tell us an entire story of conquest, ceremony, or divine right. The very length of the inscription is what gives scholars so much hope. With this much data, patterns can be found, the structure of the language can be analyzed. Some researchers, after intensive study, have proposed a compelling theory. They argue that the script records a very early form of the Zoque language, a tongue whose descendants are still spoken in the region today. If this hypothesis is correct, it would be a monumental breakthrough, effectively unlocking the Stela's story. Yet this idea is not universally accepted. The decipherment remains hotly debated, a fragile key that has not yet turned the lock for everyone. The stakes of this puzzle are incredibly high. The Epi-Olmec culture was a direct successor to the Olmecs, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica, whose colossal head sculptures hint at a sophisticated society with no deciphered writing of its own. If we could fully understand the Isthmian script, we would not just be reading one stela. We would be opening a window into the world of the Olmecs themselves, finally hearing the echoes of the civilization that laid the groundwork for all the cultures that came after. The La Majora Stela stands as a silent oracle, holding secrets that could reshape our understanding of an entire continent's deep past. The silent stones of the La Majora Stela demonstrate how a long text can still guard its secrets, but sometimes a script offers the opposite problem. We can read the words perfectly, yet the meaning remains a world away. This is the peculiar case of the Meroitic script. Far to the south, in the kingdom of Kush in what is now Sudan, a powerful civilization rose to rival even ancient Egypt. The city of Meroe became the capital of a kingdom rich in iron and culture, and they developed their own unique writing. There are two forms of this script, an intricate hieroglyphic style for monuments and an elegant, cursive alphabet for everyday use. And this is where the mystery takes a strange turn. Thanks to the Kushites' long and complicated relationship with Egypt, we actually understand how their alphabet works. Scholars have matched the 23 Meroitic signs to sounds, allowing us to sound out the words phonetically. We can read their inscriptions aloud, pronouncing the words just as a Meroitic scribe might have done. But the moment we speak these words, we hit an impenetrable wall. The language we are speaking is utterly unknown. It belongs to a language family that has left no other descendants, a linguistic isolate that appears nowhere else on Earth. So we can read the words, but we have no idea what most of them mean. It is like listening to a beautiful song in a language you have never heard. You can appreciate the melody and the rhythm, but the story of the lyrics is completely lost to you. Most of the texts we have are funeral inscriptions carved on the walls of steep-sided, pyramid-like tombs. From these, we can painstakingly piece together some basic facts. We can identify names and titles, learning about queens and generals. We see formulas that list offerings for the dead, giving us glimpses into their beliefs about the afterlife. We know they venerated a lion god, and we can trace the names of their rulers in the ruins of their palaces. But this is like knowing the chapter titles of a book without being able to read the paragraphs. The core of their spoken language, the verbs that described their actions, the adjectives that painted their world, the grammar that structured their thoughts, all of it is hidden. We hear the clear, distinct voice of the Meroitic people, but we cannot comprehend the stories they are so eager to tell. Centuries after the Proto-Elamite scribes set down their administrative records, a new script emerged from the same rugged landscapes. This is Linear Elamite, a streamlined and elegant writing system used for royal inscriptions around 2,200 years before the Common Era. While it shares a name and a geographical home with its ancient predecessor, the two scripts are completely different, representing separate chapters in the story of Elam. Where Proto-Elamite is the oldest undeciphered script, Linear Elamite offers a more tantalizing possibility. It was used to record the boasts of kings on silver vases and stone monuments, texts that hold the promise of history, not just accounting. A recent announcement sent ripples through the world of archaeology, with a team of researchers claiming they had finally broken its code. They proposed that the script records the Elamite language, and they offered translations of several inscriptions, revealing the names of rulers and their divine patrons. This would be a monumental achievement, finally giving a clear voice to this pivotal civilization. Yet the scholarly community has responded with intense caution. The proposed decipherment relies on a very small number of bilingual clues and is built on a foundation that many experts find unstable. The core problem remains the severely limited evidence. We have only around 40 known Linear Elamite inscriptions, and many of these are frustratingly short or damaged. A significant number are engraved on ornate silver vessels, beautiful objects that were likely prized possessions of the elite, but their texts are often just brief dedications. Without a long, clear, and unequivocal bilingual text, a true Rosetta Stone for Elam, any decipherment claim is difficult to verify and even harder to universally accept. So for now, Linear Elamite remains in a state of limbo, a script that teeters on the edge of being understood. It is a powerful reminder that a potential key is not the same as an open door, and that the final word on these ancient languages is often written in skepticism. Yet even before the elegant lines of Linear flowed across clay tablets, the Minoans were already experimenting with the power of the written word. In the archaeological layers beneath the great palaces, we find the origins of their script, a system known today as Cretan hieroglyphs. This is not the famous Egyptian hieroglyphic writing, but a completely separate and distinct invention, a collection of beautifully carved pictorial symbols that feel both familiar and profoundly alien. These hieroglyphs are not found on grand temple walls. They are intimate objects primarily etched onto small, delicate seal stones and stamped onto four-sided clay bars. Imagine holding a smooth, rectangular bar of clay, each face carefully impressed with a series of tiny, detailed images, a sequence of ships, flowers, human figures, and unidentifiable tools. This is the physical reality of Europe's oldest undeciphered script. The very purpose of these objects is part of the mystery. The seal stones suggest they were used for administrative control, perhaps to mark ownership of goods stored in jars or sacks, while the clay bars might have served as some form of early accounting token. The problem for modern decipherers is one of brutal scarcity. We have only a few hundred of these specimens in total, and their inscriptions are incredibly short, often just a handful of symbols arranged in a single line. How can you reconstruct a language, let alone a grammar, from such fragmented whispers? This severe lack of data makes any definitive breakthrough nearly impossible. While it is widely believed that this pictorial system eventually evolved into the more abstract linear script of Linear A, that evolutionary link does not help us read the older symbols. The language these hieroglyphs record is almost certainly the same lost tongue that Linear A later represented, a language that predates the glorious Minoan palatial era. So these tiny carved stones and clay bars are our only window into the very dawn of Cretan civilization, a world taking its first steps toward recording its own identity. They are the opening lines of a story whose language we have forgotten, the foundational words of a brilliant culture spoken in a voice we can no longer hear. The Minoan hieroglyphs represent a world of first attempts, but another ancient port city offers a glimpse of a script that might have been a final, crucial draft. In the bustling Phoenician city of Byblos, a center for the papyrus trade, archaeologists unearthed a small but spectacular find. They discovered 10 bronze tablets and spatulas, each inscribed with a mysterious script now known as the Byblos syllabary. These are not humble clay accounting records. The fact that they were meticulously cast in durable bronze suggests they held immense importance, perhaps recording sacred texts or royal decrees meant to last for eternity. The script itself is a thing of beauty, composed of clear, linear signs that feel both ancient and strangely familiar. This is where the mystery becomes so compelling. Experts analyzing the script have concluded it is almost certainly a syllabary, a system where each sign represents a full syllable like ba or gu, rather than a single consonant or a whole word. And when you look at these signs, a startling pattern emerges. Several of them bear a striking, uncanny resemblance to letters in the Phoenician alphabet, the very writing system that would later give rise to the Greek and Latin alphabets we use today. This visual echo has sparked one of the most exciting theories in the history of writing. Could the Byblos syllabary be the missing link, the vital transitional form between complex systems like Egyptian hieroglyphs and the world's first true alphabet? The idea is profoundly elegant. Imagine scribes in Byblos, a city steeped in Egyptian influence, taking the concept of pictorial hieroglyphs and streamlining them. They could have simplified these pictures, stripping them down to their core elements to represent syllables, a system far more efficient than hieroglyphs for writing a Semitic language. Then, in a final stroke of genius, a later innovator might have taken this syllabic system and refined it even further, pushing it to its logical conclusion. What if you broke those syllables apart, keeping only the consonant sounds and discarding the vowels? This single act of abstraction would have created the Phoenician alphabet, a revolutionary system of just 22 signs capable of recording any word. The Byblos syllabary would then be the bridge, the halfway point in one of humanity's most important intellectual journeys. Yet this beautiful theory is trapped by a brutal reality. We only have those 10 bronze objects. The entire corpus of the Byblos syllabary amounts to just a few hundred signs in total, with no two texts exactly alike. There is no Rosetta Stone, no bilingual inscription to confirm the language or provide a key. Is it an early form of Phoenician, or does it record a completely different, now vanished Canaanite tongue? Without more evidence, the script remains a tantalizing phantom, a set of beautiful blueprints for a revolution we know happened, but whose architect we cannot quite name. Among the countless artifacts from the ancient world, one object stands apart in its absolute uniqueness. Discovered in the Minoan palace of Phaistos on Crete, the Phaistos disc is a fired clay circle, roughly the size of a small plate, and it is unlike anything else ever unearthed. Its surface is covered on both sides with a continuous spiral of 45 distinct pictorial symbols, each one not carved by hand, but meticulously stamped into the clay with individual seals. This single fact makes the disc an archaeological marvel. It represents the earliest known use of movable type printing in human history, a technology that would not be widely seen again for over 3,000 years. And yet, this technological leap exists in a vacuum. We have the printed book, but we have lost the language, the press, and the author. No other object bearing these specific stamped symbols has ever been found, not in the ruins of Phaistos, not anywhere else on Crete, not anywhere in the world. It is a solitary message from the past, a broadcast with no receiver. This isolation has made it a magnet for decipherers, each hoping to be the one to crack its code. Over the decades, countless theories have been proposed, each one more imaginative than the last. Some scholars have argued the symbols represent an early form of the Luwian language from Anatolia, turning the disc into a foreign diplomatic message. Others have insisted it is a form of Greek, a hidden Minoan prayer, or a narrative that predates Homer by centuries. There are interpretations that see it as a geometric puzzle, a board game, an astronomical calendar, or even a hymn to a mother goddess. For every proposed solution, however, there is a devastating counterargument. The sample size is simply too small. With only 241 symbols in total and no repeating text to compare it to, statistical analysis is nearly impossible. Any proposed translation can be made to fit, but it cannot be proven. The Phaistos disc is therefore more than an undeciphered script. It is a perfect storm of mystery. It is technologically unique, linguistically isolated, and culturally untethered. It sits in its museum case not as a piece of a puzzle, but as the entire puzzle itself, a beautiful, circular enigma that continues to silently challenge every expert who dares to listen. Deep within a limestone cave in the Balkan Mountains of Bulgaria, a wall holds a secret that refuses to be categorized, known as the Sutovo inscription. This is a short but fiercely debated text, a collection of sharp, angular characters carved directly into the rock face. The symbols have a runic quality, slashing and linear, as if etched in haste or with great purpose. They look unlike the familiar scripts of the classical world, a stark contrast to the flowing Greek or Latin letters found elsewhere in the region. This very strangeness is the heart of the mystery. When was it made, and by whom? The most plausible context points to the Thracians, the powerful and enigmatic people who inhabited these lands in antiquity, famed for their gold work and their legendary warriors like Spartacus. But the Thracian language is a ghost, a poorly understood whisper from the past with no deciphered text to its name. We have names of gods and kings on coins and a handful of glosses in Greek writings, but no substantial records of their speech. This means we have no key to unlock the Setovo inscription, no linguistic foundation to even begin a translation. This vacuum has given rise to a clash of compelling theories. Some scholars, looking at the script's form and the region's later history, propose it is an early proto-Glagolitic script. This would mean it was a precursor to the alphabet created by Saint Cyril for the Slavic peoples centuries later, a radical idea that would rewrite the history of Slavic literacy. Others argue it is purely Thracian, perhaps a record of a sacred ritual performed in the cave's darkness, a prayer to a god like Zalmoxis or a commemoration of a successful hunt. Another possibility is that it is nothing more than a medieval boundary marker or a traveler's graffiti, its true meaning mundane and forever lost to time. With no consensus and no way to test these ideas against a known language, the inscription remains an open question. It stands as a stark reminder of how entire cultures can vanish, leaving behind only these cryptic scratches on stone, a message that insists it has meaning to a world that has forgotten how to listen. This debate over the first alphabet leads us to a discovery that pushes the very origins of writing into a much deeper, mistier past. In the quiet waters of a lake in northern Greece, a piece of wood emerged that threatens to rewrite our entire timeline. Known as the Despilio tablet, this wooden artifact was discovered in the remains of a Neolithic lakeside settlement, and its carbon dating produced a date so ancient it seems almost impossible, around 5,260 years before the Common Era. That is a full 2 millennia older than the earliest Sumerian cuneiform and 3,000 years older than the Minoan hieroglyphs. If this wooden slate is what it appears to be, it is not just an ancient script, it is a relic from a time when human society was first experimenting with settled farming life. The tablet itself is unassuming, a rough piece of wood with a series of carved symbols, linear shapes and simple forms that are vaguely reminiscent of letters. They are arranged in a loose, linear structure that feels intentional, as if they were meant to be read in a sequence. This is where the intense controversy ignites. Are these carvings an actual form of writing, a system for recording a spoken language, or are they something else entirely, a set of symbolic markings for ritual, ownership, or simple tallying? The arguments against it being true writing are powerful. The symbols are very basic, and we have no other long text from this period or place to compare them to. It is a solitary data point in a vast emptiness. Skeptics suggest the markings could be a form of proto-writing, perhaps denoting a family's identity, marking a sacred spot, or acting as an aide-memoir for a single individual, much like a person today might carve notches on a stick to count the days. Without a larger corpus of texts proving it represents a full linguistic system is nearly impossible. Yet, its defenders point to that very same isolation as part of its significance. They argue that writing may not have been a single invention that spread from one brilliant source, but a technology that was discovered and lost multiple times across human history. The Despilio tablet could be one of those lost experiments, a fleeting attempt by a Neolithic community to fix their thoughts into a permanent form, an attempt that died with their village when it was abandoned to the lake. It stands as a profound and haunting question mark. Is it the oldest ghost of a written language or simply a beautiful piece of decorated wood? The truth may be forever submerged, but its mere existence challenges us to wonder how many times humanity has whispered its first words, only to have them swallowed by the silence. But sometimes a language does not need ink or stone to convey a complex message. High in the Andes Mountains, the Inca Empire managed a vast territory without a script as we know it. Their tool was the quipu, an intricate device of knotted cords made from cotton or camelid wool. A typical quipu consists of a main cord from which dozens of pendant strings hang like a fringe. On these strings, a trained record keeper, known as a quipu would tie a series of knots. The type of knot, its position on the string, and even the color of the cord itself all held specific meaning. We have long understood their primary function as an accounting system. The Inca state was a highly organized bureaucracy, and quipus recorded everything from census data and tax obligations to military inventories and astronomical cycles. They were the empire's database, a physical, portable spreadsheet that could be read by experts across the realm. Yet a tantalizing mystery remains. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they documented that quipus were used for more than just numbers. Chroniclers wrote that they recorded histories, laws, and even poetry. This suggests that some quipus, perhaps those with a more complex structure or a special arrangement of colors, were narrative devices. They could have been a true three-dimensional language, capable of encoding the epic stories of emperors and the genealogies of noble families. How could a knot tell a story? Think of it not as a simple tally, but as a sophisticated mnemonic system. A specific knot tied on a red string in the 7th position might not mean the number 7, but instead trigger the memory of a specific battle or the name of a royal ancestor. The quipu was not just a clerk, but a trained storyteller who used the physical object as a script for an oral performance. The tragedy is that this living tradition was systematically destroyed by the Spanish, who saw the quipus as idolatrous objects. Today, scholars are left with around 1,000 surviving quipus, but no living quipu to teach us their narrative grammar. Cracking the code of the historical quipus is one of archaeology's most difficult challenges because it requires us to learn to read in 3 dimensions, to understand a language where meaning is tied not in lines but in loops and colors. The intricate knots of the quipu represent one form of early record keeping, but to find the very origins of the symbols that would one day evolve into a major writing system, we must travel back to a time of profound antiquity in the Yellow River Valley. Here, at a Neolithic site called Jayahu, archaeologists made a discovery that pushes the boundary of what we call writing. Dating back an astonishing 8,600 years, they unearthed tortoise shells that had been purposefully buried with the dead, and on these shells were carefully carved symbols. These are not random scratches. We see a small set of distinct, recurring marks, including one that looks strikingly similar to the modern Chinese character for eye. The presence of these symbols in a ritual burial context suggests they held deep, likely spiritual, meaning for the people of Jayahu. The burning question is whether this meaning constituted a true language. The overwhelming consensus among experts is that it did not. These Jayahu symbols are almost universally classified as proto-writing. This means they were a system of symbolic communication, capable of conveying specific concepts, but not a full writing system capable of recording the flexible, unbounded nature of spoken language. Think of it as the difference between a single road sign that means danger and a full sentence that explains the nature of that danger, its location, and its cause. The road sign conveys a clear, important message, but it is not a language. The Jayahu symbols likely functioned in a similar way, perhaps denoting a clan identity, marking a ritual offering, or signifying a spiritual concept. Their true significance, however, lies in a tantalizing thread that stretches across millennia. Roughly 5,000 years after these tortoise shells were carved, the Shang dynasty developed the first confirmed Chinese writing, the famous oracle bone script. And some of the symbols on the Shang oracle bones bear a remarkable, and perhaps not coincidental, resemblance to the marks from Jayahu. This visual echo has sparked a fierce debate. Is this a direct evolutionary line? Did the Jayahu symbols represent a seed of an idea that was nurtured and developed over countless generations, finally flowering into the complex script of the Shang? Or is the resemblance merely a case of convergent evolution, where different cultures independently arrive at similar simple shapes to represent fundamental ideas like the sun, an eye, or a tool. Without a continuous chain of evidence linking the two, we cannot say for certain. The Jiahu symbols stand at the very edge of history, a collection of silent marks that may have been the first, faltering steps in a journey that would one day produce one of the world's great writing systems. They are the whisper that may have preceded the first spoken word of Chinese civilization. Far to the west of Jiahu, a parallel mystery was unfolding in the river valleys of prehistoric Europe. The Vinca culture, which flourished across the Balkans from the 6th to the 5th millennium before the Common Era, left behind a stunning legacy of sophisticated pottery and hauntingly beautiful clay figurines. Scratched onto the surfaces of these objects is a collection of strange geometric symbols, a repertoire of angular lines, crosses, and branching patterns that feel unnervingly deliberate. These are the Vinca symbols, and with an origin dating back over 7,000 years, they are arguably the oldest system of marked signs found anywhere in the world. The sheer weight of their antiquity ignites a fierce and fundamental debate. Are we looking at the doodles of early farmers or the first stirrings of a written language on the European continent? The arguments for a simple explanation are strong. Many of the symbols appear singly or in very short groups, much like a potter's mark to denote ownership or a clan identifier. They could be purely pictographic, where a single symbol represents a single concept, like a spear for war or a plant for harvest, without the grammatical structure needed to form complex sentences. This view sees them as a powerful but limited tool, a proto-writing system that never made the leap to true literacy. Yet the counter-argument is electrifying. Some inscriptions feature sequences of up to 10 symbols arranged in a clear, linear order. This repetition and structured combination suggest a syntax, a set of rules governing how signs are put together, which is a hallmark of a full writing system. What if these markings on everyday pots and sacred figurines were not just labels but actual words? The implications are staggering. If the Vinca symbols constitute a true script, it would mean that writing was invented in Europe independently and thousands of years before the first cuneiform emerged in Mesopotamia. It would completely upend the traditional narrative of civilization's spread, suggesting that the drive to record language flared to life not in one cradle, but in several, only to be extinguished and forgotten in the deep forests of the Balkans. This is not just an academic puzzle, it is a question of precedence. Did Europe have its own, entirely separate dawn of writing? Without a Rosetta Stone from the Neolithic, the symbols remain profoundly ambiguous. They are a tantalizing promise of a lost intellectual revolution, a 7,000-year-old whisper that could either be a forgotten language or simply the world's oldest and most beautiful graffiti. The silence of the Rongorongo tablets is not for lack of trying. Generations of scholars have bent over these wooden artifacts, searching for a key in the elegant curves of birdmen and fishhooks. The fundamental challenge is the same one that plagued the first missionaries, a complete lack of a starting point. With no living tradition and no known bilingual text, every attempt at decipherment begins with a guess. Some of the most persistent theories view the script not as a phonetic alphabet, but as a sophisticated symbolic code. One compelling idea posits that Rongorongo is a complex lunar calendar. In this interpretation, each glyph does not represent a sound but an astronomical event. A particular fish might signify the new moon, while a specific plant glyph could mark a solstice, with the entire text charting the passage of time and the scheduling of rituals across a yearly cycle. Another prominent theory suggests the tablets are mnemonic devices for reciting genealogies. The Rapa Nui people placed immense importance on lineage, and trained chanters could have used the sequence of glyphs as a prompt. Each symbol, a stylized figure with a distinctive posture or headdress, might not spell a name, but instead trigger the memory of an entire lineage, recalling the deeds and ancestry of a specific chief for dozens of generations. This would make the tablets not books to be read, but scores for a performance where the true text existed only in the mind and voice of the reciter. This very ambiguity is the core of the struggle. Is it writing or is it proto-writing? To break this deadlock, modern researchers have turned to the cold, hard logic of computers. They feed every known inscription into statistical models, searching for patterns that the human eye might miss. They analyze the frequency and position of glyphs, looking for the telltale rhythms of grammar and syntax. Does a particular sign always appear at the beginning of a line like a capital letter? Do certain glyphs consistently cluster together, suggesting they form words or phrases? These computational approaches have yielded intriguing structural insights, hinting at a system with internal rules, but they have not yet bridged the gap to meaning. The dream, of course, is to find a Rongorongo Rosetta Stone. Imagine a tablet discovered alongside a known language, perhaps a European script from one of the early explorers that translates the same text. Or perhaps a new artifact will be found, a tablet with a clear illustration of a specific event, like a volcanic eruption or the arrival of a ship, accompanied by the glyphs that describe it. Until such a discovery emerges from the island's soil, the Rongorongo script remains a locked chest of cultural memory, its contents vividly carved on the outside for all to see, but the treasure inside forever just out of reach. This digital assault on the Indus script begins with a simple, powerful question. If this is a language, it must follow certain unbreakable rules. Every human language has a statistical fingerprint, a predictable rhythm to how often common words and sounds appear. In English, for example, the letter E is far more common than Z. Researchers feed every single known Indus inscription into powerful computers, meticulously counting how often each sign appears and which signs tend to follow others. They map the sequences, searching for the hidden grammar that might structure these tiny texts. The results are both promising and deeply puzzling. The script does show clear structure. Certain signs appear frequently at the beginnings of sequences, like titles or names, while others consistently anchor the ends, perhaps acting as verbs or grammatical markers. This is not random graffiti, it is a system with rules, but the brutal limitation remains the same. The average inscription is only 4 or 5 signs long. It is like trying to understand the entire English language by only studying thousands of individual phrases like the cat sat or she runs fast. You can see patterns, but you cannot grasp the full story. This scarcity fuels the fiery debate over the script's fundamental nature. Is it logosyllabic, where some signs stand for whole words or concepts, like a drawing of a fish meaning fish, while others represent syllables to spell out other words? Or is it a pure syllabic system, where every sign is a sound like ba or gu, combining to form words phonetically? The logosyllabic theory fits well with the idea of the seals denoting names and titles, a blend of meaningful symbols and sounded-out words. The purely syllabic argument points to the script's streamlined set of signs, which numbers in the hundreds, not the thousands you would need for a purely picture-based writing system. The implications of this debate are enormous. If it is a true language, deciphering it would shatter the silence surrounding this magnificent civilization. We would move from seeing them as master urban planners to understanding them as people with thoughts, laws, poetry, and names. We could finally read the name of a merchant on one of those stone seals, learn the title of a priestess, or understand a prayer to a forgotten god. It would transform the Indus Valley from an archaeological culture into a historical society with a voice. The computers hum with data, finding patterns in the silence, waiting for the one brilliant insight that can turn those patterns into prose and give a name to the nameless. The botanical illustrations in the Voynich Manuscript are a gallery of impossible life. You can trace the delicate veins on a leaf, admire the delicate petals of a flower, and follow the intricate structure of a root system, all rendered with a naturalist's care. Yet this feeling of familiarity is a trap. Every single plant in its herbal section is a phantom. They are masterful composites pieced together from fragments of known species into something that has never sprouted from the earth. A single root might branch into 3 different types of tuber, while a stem might inexplicably sprout leaves from 3 separate families. This is not a case of poor observation. It is a deliberate and systematic creation of the unreal. So what are we actually looking at? One compelling theory suggests these are not plants at all, but encoded diagrams. In this view, each bizarre botanical feature is a symbol within a complex cipher. The unique shape of a leaf could represent a letter, the number of petals a numeral, and the root structure a coded instruction. The entire plant would then be a visual paragraph, its meaning locked away until you learn the key to its visual alphabet. Another possibility is that they are fantastical representations of alchemical processes. Medieval alchemists often used the language of botany as a metaphor for their work, describing the growth of metals or the stages of a reaction as if they were cultivating a mystical plant. The Voynich flora could be a recipe book for creating the philosopher's stone, with each impossible hybrid charting a different step in the transformation of matter. Or perhaps they are simply the products of an unbridled imagination, a medieval artist dreaming of a world beyond our own, painting the flora of a different dimension. Then the manuscript shifts from the garden to the body, and the mystery deepens into sheer strangeness. The biological section is dominated by those now infamous drawings of nude women, often called the nymphs, bathing in or connected by a bizarre network of tubes and vessels that resemble an anatomical chart gone mad. The fluid-filled pipes interconnect in ways that defy human biology, linking bodies to stars and flowing into intricate, cellular-looking diagrams. Some researchers have proposed these are early, allegorical representations of human reproduction or the circulatory system, filtered through a lens of complete anatomical ignorance. Yet the consistency and complexity of the drawings argue against mere error. A more radical theory posits that these are not macroscopic views but microscopic ones. Could the artist have had access to an early, powerful lens and be attempting to depict the flow of fluids within living tissue, the structure of cells, or the pathways of the nervous system? Without the proper vocabulary to describe what they were seeing, they might have rendered the cellular world as a system of pipes and pools. Others see the clear influence of alchemy, where the human body was a microcosm of the universe, and the mixing of fluids within it symbolized the sacred marriage of opposing principles needed to create gold or achieve spiritual enlightenment. The bathing nymphs could represent substances dissolving and transforming in the alchemical bath. The Voynich Manuscript offers no answers, only a cascade of ever-deepening questions. Its pages present a world that operates on a logic entirely its own, a beautiful, meticulous, and profoundly lonely universe captured in ink and vellum, waiting for a key that may never be found. The silence of the Meroitic script is not total, for we can still explore the world that created it. The Kushite kingdom of Meroe was a formidable power, a neighbor, and sometimes a conqueror of Egypt itself. From Egyptian records and the archaeology of their own grand pyramids and temples, we know the names of their powerful rulers, queens like Amenishakito and Ammonionas, who famously fought the Roman legions. We know they worshipped a lion god named Apodamak and a creator god known as Ammoni. We can walk through the ruins of their capital and see the furnaces where they smelted iron on an industrial scale. This rich cultural context provides a crucial framework. When we sound out a Meroitic funerary inscription and hear a sequence of syllables, we can make educated guesses. If the text appears on the tomb of a known queen and includes the word we think means queen based on its position, we can tentatively assign that meaning. We can identify words that might be names of cities or offerings, like wine or bread, by their association with illustrations or their placement in ritual formulas. This painstaking work has allowed scholars to compile a tiny glossary of perhaps 24 words, but these are the bare bones of a language. the flesh and blood, the verbs that describe how these queens ruled, and the adjectives that depict their kingdom's grandeur are still missing. This leads to the fundamental linguistic question: what was the Meroitic language? It shows no relation to its Egyptian neighbor, and all attempts to link it to well-known African language families have failed. The most promising theory suggests it may be an isolated branch of the vast Nilo-Saharan family, a group of languages spoken across a wide swath of northeastern Africa. Perhaps Meroitic is a now extinct relative of languages like Nubian or Tama, spoken today by much smaller groups. If this connection could be proven, it would give us a comparative key, a way to test possible meanings and grammatical structures against living tongues. Even without knowing the words, the structure of the texts themselves offers subtle clues. The consistent word order in inscriptions suggests a fixed grammar. Specific signs seem to act as grammatical markers, perhaps indicating a subject or an object, or showing possession. It is like recognizing the punctuation in an unknown code. You can see where sentences begin and end, and identify the parts of speech, even if you do not know what those parts are saying. We are left with a profound and unique form of understanding. We know the names of Meroitic kings and queens, we can list their gods, and we can describe their economy, but we cannot hear their voices explain their own world. Their language stands as a solitary monument, a complete system of thought that we can observe from the outside but have not yet been invited to enter. These humble clay tablets open a window into one of the world's first bureaucracies. We can stand in the shoes of the proto-Elamite scribe, a highly trained individual who sat in a storeroom, stylus in hand, surrounded by the very goods he was cataloging. The air would have been thick with the smell of grain, animals, and damp clay. His task was not to write poetry or record history, but to impose order on the chaos of a growing economy. Each mark he pressed into the tablet was an act of control, a way for a central authority to know what it owned, what it was owed, and what it had distributed. These lists of sheep, goats, and measures of barley are the pulse of a state-level society taking its first tentative breaths. The very existence of this standardized script, used across a wide region, implies a powerful administrative class enforcing these rules. Someone was training these scribes, someone was collecting these tablets, and someone at the top was using this data to make decisions. We can see the faint outlines of a social pyramid. At the base are the farmers and herders who produced the goods. In the middle are the scribes and officials who managed them. And at the peak, invisible in the accounts but implied by them, are the elites who consumed this wealth and wielded this power. The system was remarkably effective, yet it was ultimately abandoned. Why would a civilization give up on such a vital tool? The answer may lie in its own limitations. The script was incredibly specialized, perfect for counting livestock, but perhaps too cumbersome for anything else. As society grew more complex, requiring treaties, laws, and literature, the proto-Elamite system may have simply hit a wall. It was a brilliant invention for its time, but like a training wheel, it became obsolete once the society needed to ride into more sophisticated territory. It might have been replaced by a more flexible writing system, or perhaps the social collapse that often reshapes the ancient world simply swept it away. Deciphering these names and titles would be like turning on a light in a room we have only been able to feel our way around. We would finally know the names of the first accountants, the first governors, the first individuals in this part of the world to have their identities recorded. It would transform our understanding of the origins of the state, revealing not just how these early Iranians managed their wealth, but who they were and how they built a civilization from the ground up. The monumental inscriptions of the Zapotecs and the dense narrative of the La Mojara Stela were not isolated phenomena. They were part of a vibrant conversation happening across ancient Mesoamerica, a shared intellectual space where the very idea of writing was being forged, tested, and refined. Think of this region not as a collection of separate kingdoms, but as a vast scriptosphere, a cultural arena where symbols, glyphic principles, and the concept of recording language were actively exchanged along trade routes and through contacts between elite centers. The glyphs carved in Oaxaca and on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec were not just local inventions, they were foundational contributions to a pan-Mesoamerican tradition of literacy. This interconnectedness points toward a profound possibility that these earlier systems may have directly influenced the most famous script of the Americas, the Maya writing system. The Maya script, with its breathtaking complexity and the recent triumphs in its decipherment, often feels like a fully formed masterpiece, but it did not emerge from a vacuum. The conceptual building blocks, the use of a combination of logograms for whole words and syllabic signs for sounds, the recording of elaborate calendrical cycles, and the very ambition to inscribe history on public monuments, all have deep roots in the traditions of the Zapotec and Epi-Olmec peoples. The Maya, in their jungle cities, appear to have absorbed these fundamental ideas and then pushed them to their ultimate expression, creating a script capable of capturing the nuanced poetry of their rituals and the detailed histories of their dynasties. This evolutionary link makes the silence of the earlier scripts so costly. By deciphering the Zapotec and Isthmian texts, we would not merely be learning about two individual cultures. We would be recovering the precursor language, the intellectual ancestor of Maya writing itself. We could trace the journey of a specific glyph, watching it evolve from a simple representation in Oaxaca to a more stylized form on the isthmus, and finally to its mature, polished version on a Maya stela. We would understand what the Maya borrowed, what they improved, and what they invented themselves. It would be like finding the lost early drafts of a great epic poem, revealing the raw ideas that eventually crystallized into a literary monument. Unlocking these older systems would let us hear the very first sentences spoken in the story of Mesoamerican literacy, a story that the Maya finished but that others began. This solitary disc from Phaistos poses a question that echoes through the silent halls of Minoan civilization. Could its mysterious stamped symbols share a language with the handwritten clay tablets of Linear A? For decades, scholars hoped the disc might be the very key to unlock Linear A, a bilingual Rosetta Stone from the same culture. The logic was seductive. They were both found on Crete, both from roughly the same brilliant Bronze Age society. Yet every attempt to force a connection has crumbled. The symbols on the disc bear no resemblance to the signs of Linear A. They are a completely different visual language, a separate set of ideas pressed into clay. This stark disconnect has fueled a radical and compelling alternative. What if the Phaistos disc is not a Minoan object at all? Its unique technology offers a powerful clue. The use of individual seals to stamp each symbol was a revolutionary act of printing, a method utterly alien to the Minoan scribble tradition, which relied on the careful, freehand drawing of a stylus. This was not an incremental improvement, it was a conceptual leap. Why would a civilization develop such an advanced technique, use it exactly once on a single object, and then abandon it forever? The silence is deafening. This has led some experts to propose the disc is an import, a foreign artifact that found its way to Phaistos, perhaps from the coast of Anatolia. In this theory, the disc is a message from a different culture entirely, a lone diplomatic dispatch or a sacred text carried by a traveler, its language as foreign to the Minoans as it is to us. It would be a relic of a lost Anatolian script, washed ashore on Crete and preserved by chance in the fire that baked its clay. This idea transforms the disc from a cultural cornerstone into a fascinating outlier, a single page from a book whose other volumes are all lost. The very method of its creation becomes the heart of the mystery. That act of stamping was a promise of reproducibility, a glimpse of a future where multiple copies of a text could be made quickly and efficiently. It was a promise that went unfulfilled for millennia. The Minoans, masters of art and administration, looked upon this technological marvel and chose to stick with their scribes and their styluses. The disc thus stands as a profound what if in the history of communication, a brilliant road not taken, its circular message forever sealed by its own magnificent isolation. The Spanish chronicler Garcilaso de la Vega, born of an Inca princess and a Spanish conquistador, wrote with a sense of profound loss about the quipus he learned of from his mother's people. He described how these knotted cords recorded not just numbers, but the very history of the empire, the laws, and the deeds of the rulers. Other early observers noted that expert quipucamayos could stand before an assembly and recite vast genealogies and historical narratives, using the quipu as their guide. These accounts are not vague rumors, they are consistent testimonies that the Inca had developed a three-dimensional language, one where history was literally tied into existence. The knots were the words and the colors were the adjectives. The challenge for modern researchers is to learn this grammar of texture and hue. What if a red string signified a warrior or a conflict, while a green one represented a harvest or a time of peace? Could the specific type of knot, whether a simple overhand knot or a complex figure 8, denote a verb tense marking an event as past, present, or future? The position of a knot along its cord might indicate its importance in the sentence, a subject or an object, a main event or a subordinate clause. It is a language where physical structure is everything. A team at Harvard University is pioneering a new approach, creating a massive digital archive of every known surviving quipu. They are cataloging every variable, the exact spin of the thread, the precise sequence of colors, the mathematical spacing between knots. They are searching for patterns that repeat across different quipus, the equivalent of finding common words or grammatical rules. The ultimate dream is to find a Rosetta Stone, a quipu that documents an event we know from Spanish chronicles, or perhaps one that was buried with a translation. The potential locked within these cords is staggering. We could recover the official Inca history of their own empire, told from their perspective, not filtered through the pen of a foreign conqueror. We might read the epic poems that were chanted in sun-drenched plazas, or learn the true name of the master architect who designed Machu Picchu. The quipus are not just accounting devices, they are a library. The books are made of string, and we are only just beginning to learn how to turn the first page. The Etruscan language presents a paradox of understanding. We can read their words, we can sound out their inscriptions, but we are still eavesdropping on a conversation we cannot fully comprehend. This is because the Etruscan language is a linguistic island, isolated in the heart of ancient Italy. While we have translated thousands of inscriptions from tomb epitaphs to temple dedications, the core of the language remains a profound mystery. The vocabulary is largely understood, but the grammar is strange and the origins are completely unknown. It has no clear relatives among the Indo-European languages that surrounded it, like Latin. This means we can read an Etruscan funerary text and understand that it lists the name of the deceased, their family, and their age, but we cannot grasp the nuances of their poetry or the subtleties of their laws. The question of where they came from has haunted scholars for centuries. Were they a people who had always been in Italy, a relic of a pre-Indo-European world? Or did they arrive from across the sea, bringing their enigmatic tongue with them? This debate was suddenly and dramatically upended by a discovery hundreds of miles away. On the Greek island of Lemnos in the northeastern Aegean Sea, archaeologists unearthed a funerary stele. It was a simple stone slab dating to the 6th century before the Common Era, and it bore a carved warrior figure alongside an inscription. When experts examined the text, they were astonished. The language was not Greek. It was, for all intents and purposes, Etruscan. The grammatical structure, the vocabulary, even the names of the people commemorated were unmistakably similar to those found in the tombs of central Italy. This was like finding a stone in England written in perfect Mayan. The geographical puzzle was staggering. How could a language spoken near Rome appear on a remote Greek island in the Aegean? The stele shattered the idea of Etruscan as a purely Italian phenomenon. It pointed to a much larger, forgotten story of migrations across the Mediterranean. The ancient Greeks referred to the Etruscans as Tyrrhenians, and historians now speak of a Tyrrhenian language family, a branch of pre-Indo-European speech that once stretched across the sea. One leading theory suggests that these Tyrrhenian peoples originated in the Aegean region or Anatolia. In this scenario, a group migrated westward, settling in Italy to become the Etruscans we know, while another group remained in the Aegean, leaving behind the Lemnian stele as their only echo. Another theory proposes a westward expansion from Lemnos itself, a seafaring culture that established outposts and left their linguistic mark on Italy. The Lemnian stele is a single, silent witness to a vast and lost network of ancient movement. It tells us that the Etruscans were not an isolated mystery, but part of a much wider, vanished world, their language a ghostly footprint of journeys across the wine-dark sea. The horned animal stares out from the fired clay, a silent witness to a debate that cuts to the very heart of what we call writing. These are the Tartaria tablets, 3 small, inscribed clay artifacts discovered in a Romanian burial and dated to an astonishing 5,300 years before the Common Era. If their symbols constitute a true script, they would predate the earliest Sumerian writing by over 1,000 years, rewriting the entire timeline of human literacy. The tablets are tiny and humble. One depicts a horned animal, perhaps a goat or an ibex, alongside a series of abstract marks. Another is divided into a grid filled with an assortment of symbols that look unnervingly like a primitive alphabet. They were found in a ritual context, buried with cremated bones, suggesting they held deep, likely spiritual significance. But what kind of significance? This is where the scholarly world fractures into fierce disagreement. One camp sees in these markings the clear seeds of a writing system. They point to the structured arrangement of the symbols within the grid, the repetition of certain signs, and the fact that they were deliberately fired to preserve them. This, they argue, is not random doodling. It is a system, a code meant to convey specific information, perhaps the name of the deceased, a prayer to a deity, or a record of a clan. The horned animal might not just be a picture, but a logogram, a symbol representing a whole word or concept, while the abstract signs could be phonetic, spelling out other words. In this view, the Tartaria tablets are a stunningly early and ultimately lost experiment in capturing language. The opposition counters with a much simpler explanation. These markings, they insist, are proto-writing at best and idle scribbles at worst. They could be the personal marks of a shaman, symbols of ownership for the buried goods, or a ritual design with no linguistic meaning whatsoever. The grid might be just a decorative border, and the repetition of signs could be mere patterning, like a child practicing shapes. The central problem is the same one that haunts the Vinci symbols from the same region and era, a devastating lack of evidence. We have only these 3 tablets. There is no long text, no progression to more complex inscriptions, no Rosetta Stone to provide a key. How can we define a full writing system from just a handful of symbols? The debate over Tartaria is ultimately a philosophical battle over a line in the sand. When does a symbol become a word? When does a collection of marks become a sentence? The tablets sit at that precise, blurry boundary, a ghost of a possibility that the human drive to record our thoughts flared into life in the Balkans millennia before it truly caught fire in the East. They are a beautiful, frustrating, and ultimately silent question. The debate over the Tartaria tablets asks a fundamental question about the very origins of writing, a question that echoes loudly in the humid jungles of Mesoamerica. For generations, the Olmec civilization was a profound paradox. Hailed as the mother culture of the region, they carved colossal stone heads with stoic, powerful faces and built the first great ceremonial centers. Their influence was everywhere, in the art, the religion, and the political structures of all the cultures that followed. yet they seemed to be a civilization without a voice. There were no grand stelae covered in glyphs, no royal inscriptions boasting of their deeds. The silence of the Olmecs was deafening, suggesting they managed their complex society through oral tradition and symbolic art alone. Then a discovery in a gravel quarry shattered that assumption. A worker in Veracruz, Mexico, unearthed a heavy, serpentine slab that would become known as the Cascajal block. This was not a towering monument. It was a portable, rectangular stone tablet, and its surface was covered in a flowing, elegant script of 62 unique symbols, arranged in clear, horizontal rows. The symbols themselves are a captivating mix featuring insects, ears of corn, thrones, and abstract shapes, all carved with a master's confidence. The arrangement is deliberate, with signs that are repeated and others that appear only once, following patterns that feel linguistic. The block was found amidst ceramic shards and other artifacts that dated it to around 900 years before the Common Era, a truly staggering date that places it firmly in the heart of the Olmec zenith. If this is genuine writing, it is the oldest in the entire Western Hemisphere by nearly half a millennium. But such a revolutionary claim faces intense and necessary scrutiny. The block was not excavated by archaeologists in a controlled dig. It was found in a quarry, and its exact context is debated. Could it be a modern forgery, or perhaps a much later artifact that somehow ended up in an older debris pile? The symbols do not appear on any other Olmec monument, making the block a solitary example, much like the Phaistos disc. This singularity is the greatest obstacle to its universal acceptance. Yet many leading scholars are convinced of its authenticity. They point to the weathering on the stone, which matches its proposed age, and the fact that several symbols bear a striking resemblance to icons found on confirmed Olmec artifacts like celts and figurines. The sheer number of unique signs strongly suggests a logo-syllabic system capable of expressing complex thought. Accepting the Cascajal block as genuine Olmec writing would be a paradigm shift. It would mean that the mother culture was not just an architectural and artistic innovator, but a literary one as well. The Olmecs would no longer be a silent precursor, but the originators of the very idea of writing in Mesoamerica. The script on the block could be the direct ancestor that inspired the later developments of the Zapotec, the Epi-Olmec, and ultimately the Maya. It would push the intellectual dawn of the Americas back into a much deeper, more sophisticated past, proving that the human impulse to record language is a universal flame, one that can ignite independently in the heart of a jungle as easily as in the cradle of a river valley. The block remains a quiet, heavy challenge, a single page from a lost library that could rewrite the first chapter of an entire continent's history. Crossing the Mediterranean, we find a script that is both familiar and deeply mysterious. This is the ancient Libico-Berber script, the direct ancestor of the Tifinagh alphabet still used today by the Tuareg people of the Sahara. Its elegant geometric characters, a collection of lines, circles, and dots, have been carved onto North African rocks for over 2,000 years. The extraordinary fact is that we can read the script itself. The letters and their sounds are known from the modern Tuareg tradition. Yet when we sound out these ancient inscriptions, we are speaking words from a language that has been lost to time. The script is a vessel, but the linguistic contents have evaporated. This creates a unique form of silence where the very act of reading aloud only deepens the mystery of what is being said. Who were these ancient pastoralists and traders who left their mark on the desert landscape, and what stories were they so determined to preserve in stone? This mystery extends across the sea to a lost world. The Guanche people, the original inhabitants of the Canary Islands, used a script strikingly similar to the Libico-Berber. Isolated on their volcanic islands for over 1,000 years, the Guanches developed a unique culture, yet their writing suggests a deep, ancestral connection to the Berber peoples of the mainland. When European explorers arrived in the 14th and 15th centuries, they encountered a thriving society, but conquest and disease quickly led to a cultural catastrophe. The Guanche language was driven to extinction, and with it, the knowledge of their script. Today, all that remains are a handful of inscriptions on clay pots and cave walls, and a few precious sentences and lists of words that were hastily transcribed by early European missionaries. We have phrases like "I swear by the sun and the moon" and names for local plants and animals. These fragments are heartbreakingly brief, like hearing a single, clear chord from a symphony that has otherwise vanished. The Guanche language is an enigma, an isolate with no known living relatives, and its connection to the ancient North African tongues recorded in Libico-Berber script is a ghostly thread we can no longer follow. Here, the challenge is doubled: an undeciphered ancient language on the mainland and a completely lost language on the islands, both using a script we can read but cannot fully understand. It is a poignant reminder that a writing system can survive even when the voice that gave it life falls silent forever. The windswept steppes of Mongolia and Manchuria hold the remnants of a formidable empire that once challenged the might of China itself. This was the Liao dynasty, founded by the Khitan people, a powerful steppe confederation whose influence stretched across northern Asia for over 200 years. To administer their vast and culturally diverse realm, the Khitan rulers performed a remarkable act of intellectual engineering. They did not simply borrow a script from their neighbors, they commissioned the creation of their own. And they did not create just one writing system, but two. These are the Khitan large and small scripts, a dual solution to a complex imperial problem. The large script was developed first, a grand and imposing system of characters intended for monumental inscriptions and formal decrees. Its symbols are logographic, meaning each character represented a whole word or concept, making it powerful for official proclamations but incredibly complex to learn and use. Shortly after, a second, more streamlined system was introduced, the small script. This was a sophisticated syllabic script where each character represented a distinct syllable, making it far more efficient for everyday administration, personal correspondence, and recording poetry. This two-tiered approach gave the Khitan Empire a voice, one for the stone of the state and one for the paper of the people. The tragedy is that we can hear this voice, but we cannot understand all its words. Decades of dedicated scholarship have yielded a breakthrough with the small script. By comparing bilingual inscriptions and analyzing its structure, experts have managed to decipher the phonetic values of many of its syllables. We can sound out the words written in the small script, but we are speaking a language we do not know. The Khitan language itself remains a profound mystery. It is believed to be a relative of the Mongolian language, part of the broader Altaic family, but the relationship is distant and obscured by time. We can pronounce the names of Khitan emperors and titles of officials, but the meaning of their laws, the content of their diplomatic letters, and the verses of their songs are still locked away. The large script, with its intricate and less phonetic nature, has resisted almost all attempts at decipherment. It is a beautiful and imposing wall of symbols that we can see but cannot climb. Unlocking these scripts is not merely an academic exercise, it is the key to hearing the authentic voice of a steppe empire. Chinese historical records provide one perspective on the Khitan, often viewing them as barbarians at the gate. But the Khitan's own inscriptions would tell a different story, one of complex statecraft, of how they managed to rule over a sedentary Chinese population while maintaining their own nomadic traditions. They would reveal the inner workings of an empire that was a crucial bridge between the nomadic world of the steppes and the settled civilizations of East Asia, a predecessor to the later Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan. The Khitan scripts stand as a testament to their ambition to be more than just conquerors. They were nation builders who wanted to write their own history in their own words. We hold their books, but we have lost the translation, leaving the full story of their mighty Liao dynasty waiting in the silence. These ancient whispers remain silent for reasons that are as consistent as they are frustrating. The most profound barrier is the absence of a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that acts as a universal key. The Egyptian hieroglyphs were a beautiful mystery for 1400 years until the discovery of that one granite slab that held the same message in both Greek and Egyptian. For scripts like linear or the Indus Valley symbols, no such key has ever been found. We have no dictionary, no parallel text to give us that first crucial foothold into their language. Without it, experts are left trying to pick a lock in complete darkness, unsure if they are even turning the right mechanism. Compounding this is the brutal problem of scarcity. Many of these scripts survive on just a handful of artifacts. The entire corpus of the Biblo-syllabary fits on 10 bronze tablets. The average Indus Valley inscription is shorter than a modern text message. How can you reconstruct the grammar of a language, let alone its poetry, from a collection of fragments? It is like trying to understand an entire novel by only reading a few random chapter titles. You might guess the general subject, but the plot, the characters, and the emotional depth are completely lost. Even when we have a decent amount of text, as with the Voynich Manuscript, the underlying language itself can be the ultimate lock. If a script records a language that is a complete isolate, with no known relatives anywhere in the world, then we have nothing to compare it to. There is no linguistic family tree to provide hints about its structure or vocabulary. The Meroitic language is a perfect example. We can sound out the words perfectly, but the words themselves are meaningless to us because the language family it belongs to has vanished without a trace. Finally, we must confront the unsettling possibility that we are trying to read something that was never meant to be read as a language at all. Some of these systems might be proto-writing, sophisticated symbolic codes that convey specific information without capturing full speech. A quipus knots record numbers and perhaps narrative prompts, but not the fluid sentences of a story. The markings on the Tartaria tablets or the Vinci symbols might be clan insignia or ritual designs, not a true written language. And then there is the chance of pure deception, that a text like the Voynich Manuscript is an elaborate cipher or an artistic hoax, a locked box that was never meant to contain a coherent message in the first place. These obstacles form a formidable wall, a combination of lost keys, missing pages, and voices that speak in a tongue with no living relatives. Yet, against this wall, human curiosity continues to press forward, armed with new tools and an unshakable belief that no story is meant to be silent forever. Yet the silence of these ancient scripts is not a permanent sentence. A quiet revolution is underway in libraries and laboratories around the world, powered not by dusty dictionaries, but by algorithms and artificial light. The future of decipherment is being rewritten by artificial intelligence, which approaches these linguistic puzzles with a fundamentally different perspective. Unlike a human expert, an AI does not get tired, it does not develop pet theories, and it can process millions of potential patterns in the time it takes us to read a single sentence. Machine learning models are now being trained to scour these undeciphered texts, searching for the hidden grammatical structures and statistical fingerprints that are the hallmark of a true language. They can compare the script of the Indus Valley, sign by sign, against the entire database of known languages, living and dead, searching for even the faintest family resemblance. This digital detective does not guess, it calculates probabilities, offering a cold, data-driven path through a problem that has been clouded by heated human debate for a century. The power of these tools is magnified by another technological leap: advanced imaging. Many of the most promising artifacts are fragile, faded, or damaged. A clay tablet might look blank to the naked eye, but under multi-spectral imaging, which captures light from frequencies beyond human vision, vanished ink can suddenly reappear. A laser scan can create a three-dimensional map of a stone inscription, revealing strokes so shallow they are invisible to touch. Scientists are using these techniques to read erased palimpsests, manuscripts where a later text was written over an earlier, more valuable one. They are peering inside still-sealed clay envelopes from Mesopotamia without breaking them open. Every new line of text recovered, every faint symbol brought back from the brink of oblivion, is another data point for the hungry algorithms, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. This is not a solitary pursuit. The digital age has broken down the walls of the academy, creating global collaborations that would have been impossible a generation ago. Online platforms now allow anyone with an internet connection to examine high-resolution scans of the Voynich Manuscript or help catalog fragments of Dead Sea Scrolls. Amateurs, freed from academic constraints and armed with unique expertise in fields like cryptography or linguistics, can bring a fresh perspective to a problem that has stumped professionals for decades. It is a collective effort, a worldwide network of curious minds all staring at the same ancient riddle, each person a potential key. The hope is that one day, a computer will flag a correlation too subtle for any human to see, or a retired engineer will notice a pattern everyone else missed, and a voice that has been silent for millennia will finally begin to speak its story. From the shores of Easter Island to the palaces of Minoan Crete, these 35 silent languages form a global chorus of human ingenuity. They are not merely puzzles to be solved, but profound testaments to the incredible diversity of our species' drive to speak across the ages. Each undeciphered script, whether etched in clay, carved in stone, or tied in knots, represents a unique intellectual universe, a different path the human mind took in its quest to make thought permanent. They remind us that history is not a single story written in a language we all understand, but a library of lost voices, each with its own rhythm, its own logic, and its own beautiful, frustrating mystery. The silence of these texts is not an emptiness, but a space filled with potential. It is an open invitation. The tools for the next great breakthrough are now more powerful than ever, and they are not confined to university halls. The next person to unlock a voice from the silent past could be anyone with curiosity and a computer. It could be a linguist, a programmer, an artist, or someone just like you, drawn into the mystery by a single, captivating glyph. These ancient whispers are waiting. Learn their stories, study their forms, and share your ideas. Stay curious, for the greatest chapter in the story of these lost languages has not yet been written, and the hand that writes it could be your own.